if you're a startup working on a project that they're articulating a need for, and they all have sort of sub needs and sub RFPs, you can apply, and it's non-dilutive funding. So basically it's free money. And so, if I kind of detect that an entrepreneur might be a good candidate, I'll definitely recommend that because it's a great stamp of approval and it's non-dilutive capital. So it's a great resource out there.
Hey everyone, this is Prashant and I'll be your host for the VC 10X podcast, and today we have Matthew Weinberg with us. Matthew is a partner at Max Ventures, an early stage venture capital fund based in New York City that primarily invests in digital commerce and digital healthcare startups across the United States and Europe. Prior to his current role, he was a White House appointee in the U.S. Small Business Administration and served as a senior advisor in the Office of Investment and Innovation. He helped drive federal programs that directed over $6 billion in capital to investment funds, early-stage technology companies, and accelerators, incubators across the country. In this episode, we talk about how you can get your startup funded by the government for zero dilution, what types of startups are eligible for government funding, what's the investment thesis at Max Ventures, how they add value to portfolio companies, perspective on down rounds, and a lot more. So without wasting any time, let's dive straight in. Oh wait, if you haven't subscribed to VC 10X yet, please do and give us a 5-star rating if you find value in this episode. Now, let's start. Hey Matthew, so good to have you on the podcast. How are you doing?
Doing great. Thank you for inviting me.
My pleasure. And let's start with your story. Like, what's your story like and how you started investing?
It's kind of a weird one, I think. So I started my career actually in government. I was in the Obama administration for many years. First at the White House as a sort of travel staff aide to President Obama, where I got to travel around the country and do events for the president. It was what people might call like a really glamorous job in politics. It's funny because that led to my next job, which was in the campaign of 2012, the Obama re-election campaign, where I think I had one of the least glamorous jobs, which was head of selling offline merchandise. So I would travel the country and send hundreds of pounds of merchandise to a national network and sell that for the president's campaign, which was every dollar counted then. I then transitioned into I think a more pertinent role to what I do today, or more relevant and more exciting for me subjectively, but objectively it was more in the investing world. So the government has a ton of resources that it gives to entrepreneurs, early stage research and development firms, early stage tech companies. And I helped run a bunch of those programs that help get dollars from the public sector into early stage deserving private sector companies. So really interesting job. I think the government has tons of resources that a lot of folks don't know about that are really relevant for entrepreneurs. So I was very lucky to work in a bunch of those programs. Actually went to the city of New York, Mayor's Office of Economic Development there, and then back to DC for the last 2 years, the Obama administration. And then there was a certain election that happened in 2016, and it changed my perspective on my professional career. And I ended up leaving the administration when it ended and the new one began, and then went back and got my grad degree and then joined Max Ventures in 2018, and the rest is history. But that's sort of my quick path to venture capital.
Yep. And that's a very interesting story and so many questions brimming in my head. So let's take it step by step in that order. So for first thing, that's a space that not many founders are familiar with, that the government can also fund your venture, right? So and you've served as a senior advisor to the White House in the Office of Innovation and Investment, right? So being someone who's been on the insides and knows very closely how these things work. So can you explain it for our listeners? How can they maybe get investments from the government, and how are the inner workings? How are you evaluating investments? What kind of investments are you looking for from the government side?
Yeah, I mean, the broad answer is it really depends on your venture and the program that the government's sort of operating at the current time. And there's some legacy programs that I'll touch upon in an instant or a second, but a lot of capital is sort of directed to these communities or these constituencies, these profiles of businesses, really dependent on like the political climate, right? So if a bill just got passed that is very, very much focused on climate, there's gonna be a ton of money out there for folks working on climate-related solutions. So, first and foremost, I would just keep apprised of the sort of political temperature in the government and kind of what the funding priorities are in the moment. That said, there are legacy programs that I would always suggest entrepreneurs go for if they're in some way if they're able to access them and they're candidates, they're somewhat they're able to, sorry, if they're able to, take the time and the resources to actually apply for them because they're pretty comprehensive. And, if they make good candidates, which just really depends on the specific funding. But SBIR is sort of the government's seed fund. So that is called the Small Business Innovation Research Grant. It's directed at really early stage tech companies. So companies just starting or that, don't have too much traction. It's actually divided by the agencies across the government. So think about healthcare, think about education, think about energy, so the Department of Energy, Department of Education, Health and Human Services. They all have their own innovation funds directed at startups. And so if you're a startup working on a project that they're articulating a need for, and they all have sort of sub needs and sub RFPs, you can apply, and it's non-dilutive funding. So basically it's free money. And so, if I kind of detect that an entrepreneur might be a good candidate, I'll definitely recommend that because it's a great stamp of approval and it's non-dilutive capital. So it's a great resource out there. But yeah, I would check out nsf.com too, NSF, SBIR. That, to me, National Science Foundation is the most like a venture capital fund that the government has. And again, you can't argue with free money if you're able to get it.
Absolutely. So basically, is it like this government giving out grants for projects they're interested in, or are they also taking on equity like the venture funds do?
No equity. It's just a grant. And so the government will be like, I want to fund solutions in blockchain, crypto. They actually do this, 5G, AR, VR, emerging tech. DoD has a huge funding pool, obviously Department of Defense. But yeah, there's these like tech topics that are articulated by the government, and then you apply to a specific one as an entrepreneur. And if you're, qualified and you receive the funding, it's basically non-dilutive grant capital. And then you can apply for follow-on funding. There's phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. Phase 2 gets up to 7 figures, so it's pretty substantial if you're able to net it. Although it takes a while, like everything else in government, but it's well-meaning and it's catalyzed a lot of innovation in the country. And a lot of times focused in areas that venture capital won't even go because it's too early, it's too risk intense on the technology side. So the government plays a big role in helping to de-risk early stage technology.
Absolutely. So basically, the government is investing at the pre-seed stage, or maybe even earlier than that, at the idea stage as well. Is it?
Got it. Yeah. Yep.
Incredible. Like this needs so much more visibility and awareness in the founders, among the founders, because they're like struggling to get these funds while offering equity in exchange. But then if you can get the same thing for free from the government, right, that's brilliant, right? And that's what you need initially in your journey, right? So,
but look, it's not for every company, right? It has to be a certain profile. If you're selling direct to consumer goods, or something on the e-commerce side, unlikely that you're going to be applicable. It's really for emerging technology companies, which, for what the broad spectrum of things, venture capital funds, I can't name a percentage, but it's, it's not the whole spectrum, right? But yes, agreed with you on your point. It's definitely a super valuable resource that, I would certainly take advantage of if I was an entrepreneur and it fit the profile of what the government was looking for.
Absolutely. Great. Now moving and switching our focus to Max Ventures, the place you're working at right now. So what's the investment thesis at Max Ventures?
Yeah, so we are early stage VC fund based in New York. We do have a global profile though. So we do about 20% of our investing in Europe, primarily Scandinavia, 80% across the domestic US. By early stage, I mean that we're pre-seed and seed. So our average check size is around 750,000 up to $1 million. We'll make about 8 to 10 investments a year. On what we focus on, I'd say half is healthcare, so digital healthcare. It's not life science, biopharma. It's really focused on what are the new companies coming out today that can help expand access, decrease cost, or improve quality to patients. So really excited to have that as a focus. I feel like healthcare investing is almost impact investing in a sense, since it's really aimed at helping and transforming a very backwards and messed up part of our economy, which is actually 20% of GDP healthcare is. So that's half. The second half is, I'd say, pretty generalist, but it's rooted in e-commerce, consumer, SaaS, some enterprise tech. But it's really just us trying to find the best entrepreneurs to work with. We also incubate, which is very important. So we've started 7 companies out of the fund, 2 healthcare, 2 e-commerce, 2 SaaS, and 1 community network for athletes, which is actually pretty exciting. But yeah, so I think in addition to being investing partners, we're really good operators as well. So I think the first 24 months of companies' life cycle, kind of getting to that Series A, we like to be really hands-on with our portfolio companies and just the fact of growing 7 companies, scaling them, all of them have received outside venture capital funding outside of Max Ventures. So anytime you stand up 7 companies, you get a lot of learnings, both good and bad, that hopefully makes us really good partners to our founders.
Now let's talk about how you evaluate the pitches that are coming to you. How are you evaluating potential investments? What are the metrics you're looking at? What kind of stage or growth stage they should be at to qualify as an investment?
Yeah, look, it really depends, right? So we invested the seed and pre-seed, so naturally there aren't many metrics to go off of, right? So we're talking about maybe early contracts, maybe early revenue. They haven't been in market very long. So obviously seeing that growth, if they've been on market 6 months, you want to see growth, some sort of growth, right? Or if it's like they have partnerships that they've contracted. I think it's really about like what's de-risking this investment. And so there's a few things. Like one is, kind of quantifiable metrics. Their revenue is exceptional. The contracts that they have with their high average contract value with like multi-year clauses in them, right? Or multi-year conditions. It's like a path for them getting to a certain ARR because they have like a really big inbound pipeline, or they have line of sight into pretty extensive revenue opportunities. That's one. 2 is the founder, right? And that should have been number 1. I think that is the first and foremost the most important thing. But having a founder that, I use a little bit of a buzzword, but like founder product fit, right? So a founder, we all have good ideas day to day, and then when we consider incubating a company, starting one, we really think to ourselves, like, are we the best equipped to start this company? Like, do we have the knowledge, the expertise, the network, the resources, some sort of cornered advantage to give us a good shot at scaling a business? And so I'm always asking these entrepreneurs, like, why you, right? And then there's also other tailwinds, like, why you, why now? Like, why are you best positioned to scale this company and take it, from a seed to a Series A to a Series B and sort of all the way up? I think a lot of times you see companies get funded that might not have that product founder fit. And, eventually it catches up to them if there's a competitor that has a CEO that is just super ingrained in the details and super in the weeds on what the problem is they're trying to solve. So that's something I definitely look for. And then, besides that, it's like broad market conditions. Do we believe in the concept? Is the market big? What's the competition out there? But I think the primary 2 things are like, how are you kind of de-risking it from a revenue opportunity side? A little bit of that is about like market size and competition, but like really, what else are you kind of doing on getting customers? And then 2 is, which should be 1, is just the founder and the team, and how are they well positioned to execute?
Absolutely. The founder market fit is so important at this stage, right? And talking about the value add. So if you invest in some company, then what does the value add look like? What does the journey look like after the investment is made? Yeah,
sort of the post value versus the pre-value is really significant. And it's, I think, like where you can honestly create a lot of alpha, and that's where you can kind of drive results, right? It really depends first of all on the founders, right? So, I wouldn't say every founder and every team has the same needs. They have a very diverse set of needs. I think for us, just because we've started 7 companies, we're really well positioned to offer advice and insight across a lot of different areas, whether it's hiring, whether it's fundraising, whether it's product development, whether it's structuring contracts, whether it's strategy. And so for us, like, it's really like generalist in the sense of what we can offer our founders, just because by fact of being 7-time founders ourselves, it's sort of anything kind of under the sun that pops up, if it's within a area that we've invested in or operated in before, we're more most likely we'll have some constructive way to help the company or kind of help address their needs. It really depends. And I think for us, like, getting a company to a Series A is sort of our benchmark of success. And so anything that's needed to do that, we're sort of all hands on deck. But a lot of it is networking, introductions, helping with their pitch deck, introducing them to investors, helping them shape their narrative for when they go out to fundraise, doing hiring, interviews. We're there sourcing candidates for them. We're there helping them interview, closing them. Really kind of strategic questions on product and market entry and sort of resource deployment, stuff like that. Yeah, but I'd say it really depends and it ranges, but we're very, very much hands-on if the founders need us to be. I think we especially have, good ways to help them just because our nature of being company creators as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And let's talk about the due diligence process. So while you think that an investment is something that you would like to make, then what does the due diligence look like? How do you do the background checks?
Yeah, background checks. So we definitely, first of all, the diligence comes on the I'd say like secondary and tertiary information side. We're like third party resources. It's like, we're just figuring out what the market's saying about this concept, right? What's the competition, verifying everything they say in the deck about market size, or like going through the footnotes, just making sure that the opportunity is the sound. And like, we're talking about companies that sort of advance to like the sort of hard diligence stage, right? And so we're making sure that the opportunity matches what it supposedly does on paper. So that's one. That's pretty easy. I think anyone can kind of do that. Two is definitely like the reference checks, right? It's like you need to have them give you references for sure, but then also you need to find people that have worked with them before that can kind of give insight on their previous companies, maybe like a board member on one of their previous companies. They don't have previous companies. You want to find people that they worked with that can really attest to their character and their ability to ultimately grow and manage a team and scale a business. I mean, it's not something that everyone can do phenomenally well. So, ensuring that we have good insight on the sort of person to person side to make sure that, folks are going to be up for the task and up for the job and, have a really good reputation and that people want to work with them. I mean, that's critical. And you don't really get that from just doing research, right? You get that from actually getting references and character references. And so, I like to get, before I work with someone, almost saturated on the information that I'm intaking, right? So it's like talking to enough people where the data points I'm getting from them start to all align. And then the conversations I have, maybe like the seventh or eighth person, just like I'm not getting any new information. So I feel like it's like been saturated. And that's when, I feel like I can get conviction on someone's character. So yeah, a lot of it is that, especially at the early stage, right? I think if I was a growth stage investor, I mean, you're doing different analysis and it's more on the quantitative versus qualitative side. So for early stage, it's very much about these references in addition to just doing your homework on the market and making sure the opportunity is as big as it seems.
Yeah, right. And that's a great approach to do it as long as it gets saturated and you start hearing the same thing again and again, right?
Yeah. Amazing. You have to do it fast. Like you can't, that's ideal situation if you have a lot of time, but trying to talk to as many people as possible is definitely key.
Right. And what are some exciting portfolio companies that you'd like to mention on the podcast, solving exciting problems?
Yeah, well, I don't want to leave anyone out, but off the top of my head, maybe a few recent ones is Certify OS. So they're in the credentialing and licensing space. So every telehealth company that wants to expand geographies, has doctors or providers that are in New York and wants to serve patients in Nevada, for example. Those doctors need to get licensed and credentialed. Licensed as in licensed to operate in the state of Nevada, credentialed as in getting under a payer contract or an insurer contract in the geography they're serving, in this example, Nevada. And it's a really big pain. It's a headache. And Certify OS, in my opinion, is the best company out there to help these telehealth companies and legacy companies that want to engage in telehealth really expand their offerings. So you're kind of creating access to more doctors, especially there's a doctor shortage, also nurse practitioners, other profiles of providers too. But a company like that's able to help these telehealth or patient-facing companies scale and expand access is super exciting to me. So I love Certify. They're doing great. Stellar team there. Another one that we invested in recently is Sylvan Health. I love them too. They're expanding access to nutritionists. So building a huge network of in-network, as in, covered by insurance, nutritionists and dietitians, very key for a population that, isn't the most healthy in this country and is overweight and has, a severe, I think a severe crisis in, obesity. So having access to that type of profile doctor, expanding access to me is really exciting. And then a company that we just incubated actually that I'd love to talk about is Elion. So Elion is a marketplace for digital healthcare software. So we noticed that there was an explosion of software out there for healthcare and that our companies that wanted to use technology and use software had a really hard time understanding and eventually making decisions with speed and conviction. So we thought, why shouldn't there be a marketplace that collects all this information on software, healthcare software out there? So sort of like a G2.com, which is almost like a Yelp for software, but we wanted to make something really robust for the digital healthcare community to find, source, and eventually purchase software. So Elion is coming soon. We're doing the product development. We raised a good amount of capital from some amazing investors, and we just hired a stellar CEO who's building the product now. So we're really excited to launch that. We think that could help technology adoption across the whole ecosystem if you're able to buy technology faster and make decisions faster. So we're really excited about that as a sort of rising tide or sort of like a game changer for the industry. So if it works out the way we think it will, which we're confident it will, but we're really excited about that one.
For sure. All those companies sound very exciting and solving very important problems. I'll make sure to link to all those companies in the blog post that goes along with this episode for anyone who wants to check them out. Besides, let's talk about exits. You've had some exits, and while you're making an investment, you always have an expectation of return on that investment, obviously, right? So in what time frame are you looking at exits in that respect?
Yeah, look, it depends again, and I think just a simple answer for the seed stage, it's between 7 and 10 years. I mean, our fund cycle is 10 years. That's the sort of preconceived timeline of a seed fund, and you obviously have multiple funds occurring simultaneously, where you'll have an investment period of 3 years or so, and then you'll raise another fund, and that fund will be 3 years or so. So they're sort of stacked across years. But yeah, I mean, when we're investing in a seed company, it's about 7 years. Even a pre-seed company could be longer, but we really don't think about like the year. We don't ascribe like a certain year to a certain company. But obviously, the further a company is along, the hope is that they get to an exit faster. So if you're investing in a Series A, you obviously want that to exit faster than a seed stage company. But yeah, I mean, like that's kind of the mental sort of flag is between 7 and 10 years.
Got it. And talking about the VC landscape, so you worked in VC or maybe investing in both the private sector and even with the government, right? So what do you think needs to change in this entire landscape of investing and VC? Anything?
Good question. I mean, an obvious one is like who gets capital, right? So if you look at the breakdown, both demographically and geographically, it's pretty concentrated, right? Certain demographic groups get the wide majority of funding. Certain geographical groups get the wide majority of funding. Although that's changing a bit, just with COVID, you're able to access entrepreneurs in different cities. So I think creating ways to incentivize more capital going to different demographic groups is huge and massive, and will be make the industry, I think, function better and help catalyze entrepreneurship and help catalyze new business creation for sure. But I think that look, it's a business that rewards risk. It's a business that really rewards investing at the earliest stages. And again, like sometimes venture capital doesn't even get there, right? That's sort of the point of government to help kind of step in when things are really risky and when you have emerging technology that's not yet proven in the market. And so I think having more relation maybe between government funding those early stage sort of emerging technologies or like super cutting edge technologies, than having venture capital kind of come up behind it, is something that I've thought about a lot. But also giving back, I think, is key. I think a lot of venture capital, it's a lot of PR game, right? But it's like, how do you actually, maybe think about impact, think about, bringing on, different sort of interns or staffers, or how do you kind of think about your community that you operate in and things that you can do better to serve your community and not just be, quote unquote, straight investors. So yeah, those are things I think about, but like maybe unique because I work in government and, I understand the challenges if you're at a small fund and doing 100 things at once. But, overall, I'd say like working with government more and then, hopefully figuring out ways to get more capital into more diverse geographic and demographic groups.
Yep. That's definitely something that needs more focus. And my last main question for you would be, what's your take on the current and recent slump in the investments market? Like the investments have slowed down, the valuations are going down. So how has that impacted how you operate at Max Ventures?
Yeah, it's been interesting. I think if you asked me a couple of months ago, I thought it would be all valuations are coming down, from kind of that pre-IPO stage all the way down to seed investing. But I think it happened in the pre-IPO stage and happened in later growth stage and started happening in Series C, B, and A. And then all of a sudden seed, haven't seen it as much because I think that, my theory is that the investors that typically do growth rounds or like Series B and A, can't quite justify the high valuations or need to like support their companies that kind of maybe took too high valuation in 2021, and they need to sort of have a bridge loan to grow into that valuation and hopefully, keep growing. So I think that it's a hard time to invest in potentially overvalued companies at the Series A and B stage. So I think, they're looking for opportunity, and if it's not in that stage, they're going to go downstream. So they're going to go for the seed stage, and so I'm seeing seed stage valuations, hold or increase a little bit, become more competitive. Even in 2021, it was competitive with your Tigers and your SoftBanks, and even though they're kind of stepping out of the market a bit, I think there's another profile of sort of growth stage, later stage investors that are coming down to seed because, one, you can still invest in hopes and dreams at the seed stage. It's still valuations that are TBD, that there's no evidence whether or not they've grown into it or not. And then two, it's, there's really talented teams coming to market. And so if you're not going to put your capital into maybe an overvalued Series A or Series B, you might want to come down and invest in a really talented team at the earliest stages. It might be a good place to deploy capital. So we're definitely seeing a lot more activity in the seed stage, where I think a few months ago we were kind of expecting that the seed stage valuations to follow the trends of the Series A and the Series B, but I think that they're even more competitive than perhaps they were a year ago.
Yeah, that's very interesting to know. I didn't know that the seed space is actually the seed stage valuations are going up and not down. That's
right? My perspective anecdotally. Yeah. I see a lot of companies, but I obviously don't see every company. So yeah, I think that's my opinion is it's a little, it has not reflected valuation, decline has not reflected what I've seen in the sort of growth stage profile of the company.
Yep. Yeah, and that sort of makes sense also because the valuations are based on your past work, and in seed stage you don't have much past work, right? To show, and then that's why you kind of go on the same slope, right? Right. So let's move on to the rapid fire round, wherein I'll ask you 5 quick questions about the fund, and you have to give 5 quick answers. Good for it?
Okay.
All right. So the first one is sectors and regions you invest in.
Oh, we invest in digital healthcare, I'd say digital commerce, e-commerce generally, and we invest in Europe, Scandinavia primarily, and then the US.
Got it. And what stage you typically invest in?
Pre-seed and seed, and we also incubate companies. We've started 7.
Got it. What's the typical check size?
$750K to $1 million.
And where can founders pitch you if you're open to cold?
One more time, I'm sorry?
Where can founders pitch you in case you're open to cold?
Oh, sure. Yes. My email is matt@maxventures.vc, matt@maxventures.vc. And yeah, happy to have you share that.
Got it. And where can our listeners follow you?
My favorite is LinkedIn. So find me on LinkedIn, or I'm at Matt J. Weinberg on Twitter.
Got it. I'll make sure to put all the links in the show notes below.
Please.
So that
Love that
our listeners can get there easily. Thank you for coming on, Matt. It was a pleasure hosting you, and happy investing.
Thank you so much. I appreciated it. And thanks for the invite, and looking forward to staying in touch and getting the recording. And thank you so much. Appreciate it.